Hi everyone, when we are training any type of stationary behavior, we need to be sure that we train the 3 Ds, which are distraction, duration, and distance. We also need to be sure that we teach a release cue. In the first part of this video, you will see that I am working through teaching Reggie what a release is. This should be a separate training session that you work through with your dog. What it helps them understand that is once you've asked for a behavior, they are to maintain that behavior until either you ask for another behavior or until you release them. How I go about training this behavior is I ask for a sit or a down. I reward my dog 3 times for maintaining that position with very little duration in between each reward to begin with, and then I release them with a cookie toss. Remember, you're actually training a release here, so the most important thing to reward is the actual release cue itself. Another key point to remember here is to not move your hand when you're actually giving your okay or break, whatever word you're using for your release. You want to give your cue and then move your hand after. If you do it at the same time, your dog won't really pick up on the verbal cue. They'll just see the motion of your hand. Down. Break. Very nice. Well done. All right, so now that our dogs know that they're waiting for a release cue, we're going to take a look at our first D, which is duration. So when I talk about duration, I'm talking about the amount of time your dog stays on their mat. I sometimes find duration one of the hardest Ds for dogs to learn because they actually feel that they should be doing something. It's just awkward for them just to kind of sit there while we're looking at them. You want to build duration gradually, so you would start with 1 second in between rewards and gradually build up to 3 seconds to 5 seconds. And then one of the most important things is you don't want to always make it harder on the dog, so you want to drop back down to 2 seconds, then maybe 6 seconds, then 4 seconds, and gradually building up to as much duration as that you feel you need through the training session. Usually 10 seconds is plenty. Very important, you can only work on one criteria at a time. So if you're working on duration, you can only work on duration. Do not add any distance and do not add any distraction. We will gradually combine all 3 together. All right, so we're going to take a look at distance. You can see at the very beginning here that some dogs may not be able to tolerate a full step back. You may just have to do a weight shift back. You just work at the criteria or the level that your dog's at. Do not feel that you need to take full steps away in the very beginning. The most important part here is that once you actually take your steps back, you need to go directly back to your dog. People's favorite thing to do is take steps back and then pause. But remember, you can only work one criteria at a time, so you need to take your step back and go directly back to your dog. You can gradually combine criteria together once you've trained them all separately. The same thing goes for distance as it does duration. You want to make sure that you vary your actual criteria. So sometimes you take 1 step back, sometimes 5 steps, sometimes 2, sometimes 4. You don't want to always make it harder on the dog. All right, so you guessed it. Now we're going to take a look at distraction. So same process here, do a distraction, reward your dog, do another distraction. Don't always make it harder on them. And remember, you can only work one criteria at a time. So you should be staying right next to your dog and adding your distractions, and then gradually we'll add some distance with distractions. This is probably one of the toughest distractions. How many people's dogs would have actually walked over to them when you sat on the ground? Have some fun with it and try different things. Remember, it's not a big deal if they actually break their stay or their position on their mat. Just simply recue them back to their mat and start over. That's just information for you. Okay, so here you can see that I'm just starting to add some criteria together. You want to do this gradually. If you're increasing your distance, you might want to decrease your distraction a little bit and gradually change things up. But again, now you can, once you've trained them all individually, you can start combining them together and seeing if your dogs can work through some distance and distraction and duration all at the same time.
All right.
So here you can see I'm just adding the 3Ds to what I did at the very beginning, which was my release training. But again, any stationary behavior, you can actually add your distance, distraction, and duration to all of that training to actually help proof it better so that the dog is well aware that when you ask for a behavior, that they're actually waiting for a release, whether you add these 3Ds or not.